Today, we are going to be learning about simple interest. All of these questions have to deal with money, earning money, making money, and borrowing money. Let's look at exactly what simple interest means. So when you put money in a bank, you earn interest on your money. You may have heard this before, but what we're going to talk about today is exactly how that works. So the term interest is the total money you're earning on top of the money that you put into a bank. Principal is a vocabulary word that you need to understand in this lesson, and that's the initial amount of money that you invested. The rate is going to be the percent that you're earning on your money, and that'll change. In each question, they're going to give you a different rate. And then time is always going to be talked about in years when we do these problems. So anytime you see a word problem, we need to make sure we're talking about time in years. This is the formula that we're going to use to solve these problems. I equals PRT. Every single question we use is going to use this formula. So write this down in your notes, and we're going to talk about what each one of these letters stands for. So I is the interest, or the total money you're earning. P, which we just talked about in the previous slide, is the principal, or the amount that you originally invested. R is the rate, which is the percent the money earns, and that needs to be turned into a decimal. It'll always be given to you at first as a percent, and by moving the decimal place twice to the left, we will turn it into a decimal so we can use it in our formula. And then T, as we said before, is time, and it must be in years. So here's an example question for you. Scrooge McDuck invested $500 in a bank. The banker told him that he's going to earn 5% on his money every year. If he leaves his money in the bank for 4 years, how much money would he earn? So using this formula, we're going to solve this problem. The P, which is the principal, is 500. The R, which is the rate, is at 5%, which I've told you before, we have to turn this into a decimal, so it would look like that, 0.05. And the T is in years already, so we don't have to do any calculations, and the T is just going to be 4. So we're going to take those three amounts and plug them into this formula, I equals PRT. And that's what it would look like. What we're solving for is the I, or the interest. We don't know how much money he's going to earn, but we know the principal, we know the rate, and we know the time, and I simply just plug them into the formula. Now, you're just going to multiply. Remember that when variables touch like that, as you see in the formula here, I'm going to highlight it for you. When the variables are touching, or the numbers here as we plug them in are touching, that means we're going to multiply those numbers together. Again, I'm okay if you use a calculator. You don't have to. You can multiply it out. But if we multiply 500 by 0.05 times 4, you're going to see that that equals $100. So that means over 4 years, on top of the $500 Scrooge McDuck put in the bank, he's going to earn $100 for just letting his money sit there. That means now he has $600. He started with $500, he put it in the bank, left it there for 4 years. Now he has $600. Here's another example. We're still going to use the same formula, I equals PRT. And to review, and you should put these in your notes, I stands for interest, which is the total money earned. P is the principal, or the amount you originally put in the bank. The R is the rate, which will be given to you as a percent, which you then need to turn to a decimal. And the T is the time, which must be in years. So here's another word problem. Mr. Burns decided to put some money in the bank to hide it from Mr. Smithers. The bank told him that they would pay him 2% on his money annually. He put $850 in an account for 18 months. How much money did he earn? So let's look at what we do know. You should always write down the pieces that we know. We know that the principal that he started with was $850. We know that the rate that the bank is paying him on his money is 2%, which we then need to turn into a decimal, which would be 0.02, because we got to move that decimal place 2 spaces to the left. And the time is 18 months. Now notice, that's not in years. So in order to make this T to a number we can use, we need to turn the 18 months into years. To do that, you're going to divide 18 by 12, and that's going to give you 1.5, which should make sense to you because 18 months is a year and a half. So in terms of years, 18 months is 1.5. That's always how you're going to calculate it. If they give you the time in months, to turn it into years, you need to divide by 12. Now we're just going to take those numbers and plug them into our formula. I equals PRT. So we knew all of those values, we simply plugged them in. Now using a calculator or multiplying them out with a pen and paper, if you multiply 850 by 200ths by 1.5, you're going to get a total of 25.5. So that means he earned $25.50 on his money. He started with $850 and now he has a total of $875.50. But the amount that he earned, which is what they asked you, how much money did he earn? I've highlighted that part of the question. He earns $25.50. Even though it says 25.5, since we're talking about money, that 0.5 represents 50 cents. For this next example, I'm going to leave the interest formula up in the top corner there for you to refer back to, as well as what each of the variables means. Here's the question. Mr. Krabs is investing some money, and he has two options. He can either take his money to the Bank of Bikini Bottom or to the First Nautical Bank. They showed him two different investment options. Bikini Bottom Bank offers a rate of 4% for 3 years, and the First Nautical Bank is offering him a rate of 3% on his money for 42 months. We're going to find out if he's investing $1,200, which is his better option. So this is Mr. Krabs. We know he wants to make as much money possible. So which one of these banks is going to be the better choice? Let's first look at the Bikini Bottom Bank. The principal which he's investing is $1,200. That's going to be the same for both banks. But what's different is the rate at Bikini Bottom is 4%. We're going to turn that into a decimal, which would become 400ths or 0.04, and the time would be 3. It's already in years, so we can just leave it as a 3. So let's solve to figure out how much interest he would make at Bikini Bottom Bank. We're going to use the formula I equals PRT and simply plug all those values into that formula. Again, since the P, the R, and the T are all touching, remember you're going to just multiply those terms together. You can use a calculator if you would like, and you're going to see that the interest earned on his money at Bikini Bottom Bank would be $144. Let's now figure out if the First Nautical Bank is going to earn him more money or less money than Bikini Bottom Bank. So at the First Nautical Bank, his principal is the same because he's going to invest that same $1,200. The rate, though, is now 3%, which would turn to 0.03, and the time is 42 months. The problem there is that's not in years. So in order to turn that T into a number that we can use, we need to divide 42 by 12 to turn it into years, which is going to be 3.5 or 3.5 years. Now let's plug those values into our formula, I equals PRT. There you go. And if you multiply all of those terms together, you're going to see that the interest earned would be $126. Now, knowing Mr. Krabs, looking at these two, Bikini Bottom Bank is going to earn him $144. And the First Nautical Bank is going to earn him $126 in a longer time. So the best option here would be Bikini Bottom Bank because in 3 years, he's going to earn $144. Now, Plankton is in trouble. The chum bucket had to close down because of the coronavirus. We're going to look at a different type of question here. Now we're going to talk about loans. We're still going to use the same formula and the same information, but now instead of investing money, we're going to be borrowing money. So P, the principal, is going to be the original amount of money borrowed. The R is still going to be the percent, which you still need to turn to a decimal. The T is still time in years. But this time the interest, or what we're solving for, is going to be the money that we owe on top of the money that we borrowed. So poor Plankton here, he borrowed $400 from Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs told him he could borrow the money as long as he paid 6% interest on his loan. So what I'm asking you is, if he borrows that $400, how much money would Plankton owe after 9 months? So we're going to use that same exact formula. The first thing we need to do is figure out what are all the pieces, the P, the R, and the T. So the principal is $400. The rate is 6%. Remember, we're going to turn that into a decimal, which is 0.06. And the time is 9 months. Again, we need that T to be in years, so we're going to divide 9 by 12 to see that our T is 0.75. We're going to plug all those values into the formula we've been using this whole time. So 400 times 0.06 times 0.75 lets us know that the interest on that money that he's borrowing is $18. So if the question that I'm asking for you is after 9 months, how much money would Plankton owe? So he owes this $18, but he also borrowed the original $400. So the total amount that he's going to owe him after 9 months, you're going to take the original amount that he borrowed, $400, and add that 18 to it to see that he owes Mr. Krabs a total of $418 after 9 months. Not too bad. You'd think Mr. Krabs would want more than just an extra $18, but after 9 months, he's going to pay him back that $418 because of the interest that was charged. So it says again, after 9 months, Plankton would owe Mr. Krabs $418. Now that you've seen both types of questions, we're going to work on finding the missing piece. So what I mean by that is in some questions, you will be given the interest earned or the interest owed, and you're going to have to solve for one of the other pieces, either the principal, the rate, or the time. So in this question, Homer borrowed some money from Mr. Burns at 4.5% simple annual interest. At the end of 3 years, the interest on the loan was $270. What we're asking you to find is what was the original amount of the loan. So always in these questions, you need to do step 1, what do I know? So the 4 pieces that you can know are the I, or the interest, the P, the principal, the R, the rate, and the T, the time. So we need to go back to this question and see, what do we know? Well, I know the interest. It tells me right here. The interest on the loan was $270. So I know that my interest, or my I, is going to be represented by 270. Now let's look back and see if we can figure out what the principal was. Remember, the principal is always going to be the original amount invested or the original amount borrowed. And if you look back at this question, you'll see that's what they're asking you for. They're asking you what was the original amount of the loan. So the P is going to remain a question mark. Let's look and see if we can find the R, or the rate. If you go back to the question, remember that's always going to be as a percent. And I can see right here, 4.5% is going to be my rate. And remember that that needs to be turned into a decimal. So my R is going to be represented with 0.05. And then let's see if we can find the time. Going back to the question, yes, I can see that we're talking about 3 years. So the T equals 3. Step 2 is going to just be to plug everything you do know back into our original formula of I equals PRT. So I'm going to plug in every variable that I know. But the P is going to stay a P. If you look at the formula, you can see the P is going to stay a variable because I don't know what that is. So in order to solve this, we need to simplify. And the first step, I can see that because the 0.45 and the 3 are touching, I need to multiply those together. So if I multiply 0.045 times 3, I'm going to end up with 0.135. So my new formula is going to be 270 equals some value P, which I don't know, multiplied by 0.135. Because the P is being multiplied by that 0.135, in order to get the P by itself, remember the goal of any equation is to isolate the variable, I need to divide both sides. I'm going to erase this right now, but I need to divide both sides of this equation by 1.35. So I'm going to do this like this, divide by 1.35. And whatever I do to one side of an equation, I need to do to the other. And that's going to allow me to cancel out the 0.135 on this side so that I can end up with P all by itself. So 270 divided by 0.135 gives me a total of 2,000, which equals P. So by using this formula, I can see that the money that Homer borrowed from Mr. Burns was $2,000. So remember, you're just using that formula, plugging in what you do know, simplifying, and solving by isolating the variable that you don't know. Let's look at another example. So in this question, we're still solving for a missing piece. And remember, sometimes you're going to be given that interest or earned or owed, and you need to solve for one of the other pieces. Donald Duck borrowed $200 from his brother Scrooge at 8% simple annual interest. He finally paid him back $280 to pay off the loan. How many years did it take to pay back the loan? So we can know right away by looking at this question. What we don't know is how many years it took him to pay off the loan. So we need to figure out all the other pieces. We need to figure out the interest, the principal, and the rate, and the time is going to be the piece that we don't know. But looking at this question, it's a little different because we need to first find out how much the interest was. And if you look back, you can see that he borrowed $200 and he paid him back $280. So how much did he have to pay back on top of his initial $200? Well, all you need to do to solve that is subtract. 280 minus 200 is going to let you know that he paid $80 interest. So that's what I'm going to put over here for the I. The I equals 80. The principal That's how much he initially borrowed, is 200. The rate that Scrooge offered him was 8%, and remember, we have to turn that into a decimal of 0.08. The time is what we don't know. So in step 2, as always, you're going to plug in what you do know into this formula of I equals PRT. And you can do that all in one step, plug in all the missing pieces, and this time the T is going to remain a variable because we don't know how much time it took. So now, in order to solve this, remember that when two numbers touch, like we have here, the 200 times the 200 next to the 0.08, we need to multiply those two together, which is going to give us 80 equals 16t. Now, in order to solve for t, or to isolate t, we need to divide both sides of this equation by 16. So I'm going to divide both sides by 16, which is going to allow me to cancel out the 16 on this side and end up with t all by itself. And if you divide 80 by 16, you're going to see that 5 equals t, which means that it took Donald 5 years to pay back Scrooge. So there was quite a bit in this lesson, and I wanted to provide you a few keys to success in order you guys do well. The first, you need to know the formula. I equals PRT is going to be used in every single one of these questions. You need to know the I stands for interest, which is going to be either the money earned if you're investing money or the money owed if you're borrowing money. The P is the principal, which is always going to stand for the original amount invested or the original amount borrowed. The R is your rate, and that is always going to be turned from a percent into a decimal. You can't solve unless you turn it into a decimal. If you try to plug in the number as a percent, you're going to get the wrong answer. The T, or the time, has to be in years. So if they first give you the time in months, we need to turn it into years by dividing by 12. And lastly, you're always going to be given 3 out of the 4 pieces. Whether they give you the P, the R, and the T, and we're simply solving for the I by multiplying, or if they're giving you 3 pieces and you're solving for the missing piece, you need to solve what you don't know by simplifying and then isolating your variable. I really recommend taking notes on these slides, and you will do great. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me.